Board of Examiners is taking place in Room 1A of the Davy Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. A notice of this board meeting was posted on the board website on May 22nd, 2017. All guests, please sign in. Roll call. Here, thankfully.
Present.
Susan?
Yes.
Okay. Blair Parker?
Here.
Brian Tibbs?
Here.
Rick Thompson? Frank Wagster? Kathy Will?
Present.
Ricky Bersai? Stephen King?
Here.
Laura Reinberg?
Present.
We have a quorum. This time I'd like to acknowledge our guests. If you would please stand and state your name.
Casey Anderson, Executive Director of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers.
Don Baltimore, General Counsel, Lobbyist for Tennessee Ideas.
Good morning, Nathan Risley. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Ann McGowan, Tennessee State Architect.
Chris Courtney, I'm here representing ASCE Tennessee Section and Nashville Branch.
Cindy Jones, I'm on the engineering board.
Shalina Brown, I'm with the legal division. I will be transitioning with Matthew Reddish and switching out boards and joining each boards.
Thank you. All right, are there any announcements?
I do have a couple of announcements. First is just to emphasize it's very important to speak into the microphone since we have someone joining us telephonically, so just a reminder. Also wanted to announce that East Tennessee State University's Interior Design Program was recently awarded accreditation from CEDA, the Council for Interior Design Accreditation, for a 6-year term, 2017 to 2023. It's not actually called interior design, though. It is termed interior architecture program, so just wanted to point that out, which I know the board has some issues with that, but we have no control over that, obviously. So, but they did receive accreditation, so that's certainly good news for them.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements? Okay. At this time, we'll review the agenda for changes or no additions. Is there any? Okay. This time, we'll go to our consent agenda. John?
Okay, the consent, well, actually, I should say the minutes from the April 2017 board meeting are on page 24 on your iPads, or page 27 if you're following the pagination on the document I emailed to you. So Walker Garner and I chose different pagination methods, so the numbering may be a little different, but either page 24 or page 27, and these are for your approval.
And do I hear a motion that we approve the minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Staff complaint report.
It's on page 42 on your iPads, or page 45. And these are complaints in which the discipline was in another jurisdiction was less than the suspension, revocation, or voluntary surrender. We sent them a letter of caution and recommend closure.
I have a motion that we accept the complaint report as presented. Right, you have to speak up because somebody's on the...
Yes,
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay. At this time, if anyone would like to make a comment from the public sector, we offer that opportunity. Okay. All right, and then we'll move forward then with professional society reports.
Good morning. Casey Anderson with ACDC Tennessee and TSPE. Since we were last together, we've had a busy couple of months. Our legislative session is finally behind us. We had a great year, really busy year, but some really good things came out of it, and some issues that we were significantly concerned about that we'll cover in a little while, I think, on the agenda that affect the board specifically, I think came out certainly better than we started, and I think have put us in a pretty good place. We did have the bill that we had been discussing about engineering licensure. The amendment that we offered did stick, and so it has been signed into law, and it does sunset in 2 years. So for the next 2 years, an engineer who only has a master's degree in engineering and not that undergraduate degree does have the opportunity for the next 2 years to come before you all, as long as they have gone through the FE, the PE, and that progressive experience is written into that bill for you all to evaluate at 20 plus years, so at least 20 years. And that master's degree has to come from an ABET accredited, a program with an ABET accredited program within it. But that's the biggest change in terms of licensing. Certainly we've had some other major legislation among that. We were sort of front and center on the IMPROVE Act, which was very fun. But I'm going to let Nathan cover the rest of the political garb because he is far more eloquent than I. So, I want to start by saying congratulations to Chris Baltney. Chris, as you all know, comes to the board on behalf of the ASCE, the Civil Engineers Chapter. He was just recognized by the National ASCE group with the Edmund Friedman Professional Recognition Award, which is a huge deal. So, also thrilled for him, he's a with Lipscomb University, and John Coffin and I were honored to be asked to speak at the opening of the new Fields Engineering Center over there, which was great fun, and we got to pull the rope to see the thing drop, which you don't let me do very often. I'm telling you, rope puller, I'm in. Other stuff that's been coming up, one other little political thing, just so that you are aware that there's a special election right now outside of Memphis and Collierville. The Republican candidate for that office is a PE. And I just feel like people should know that, because he doesn't practice as a PE, but he is a PE, and just like spread the word on, it's Kevin Bone, PE. So QBS, we've had, it's been pretty busy in terms of talking with some municipalities and some transit groups. I've sent 7 letters since we met last in this group. Of those, 6 of those RFQs have been amended, and 1 we're still working on. So it's a really successful process, and it typically goes fairly well, and most of our entities with whom we're working are really receptive to trying to do the right thing and making sure that they're not putting the engineers and architects at risk in that. But I just want to keep you updated on where we go with that. We've had our spring PE exam review class just finished practice last exam. We had 100% pass rate this time, which is really exciting. We share that class with ASCE. It's a joint effort. We've got another one coming in the fall that we're setting up. This time we are going to move it over to Lipscomb into the new engineering center, where we've got access to way better video equipment than we do at my office. So the hopes, we were hoping to be able to expand to a broader audience for that. Chris and I have also been talking about Lipscomb is looking at doing, perhaps moving the FE review class over there to a broader audience as well, and offering the FE review remotely working on that in the next semester. So we're excited about that. Across the state, we gave ACEC and the Tennessee Engineering Foundation and our chapters gave about $15,000 in scholarships this year to university students, so that's exciting. We are working with the Quality and Construction Group, which is actually sort of administered, facilitated, run by, it's in her wheelhouse, Anne Lauren, who's our new state architect. We are actually starting to move the needle in that group on 360-degree evaluation for designers, starting with the designer evaluations, and then we move to the construction side as well. But represented in that group are all of the state procurement agencies, so TBR, UT, and Stream / General Services, and then from the design and construction side, the industry side, thanks. I have not had coffee today. AIA, ACEC, ABC, and AGC each have 3 representatives in that group. So I think it'll be interesting for you all to see what comes out of that when we're looking at really how can we set up evaluations that are meaningful and useful and fair and all of those pieces. So stay tuned for that. We've got 2 board retreats for TSPE starts tomorrow at Henry Horton State Park, and ACEC will be at the Graceland Guest House in Memphis. Excited about that. So if y'all have anything that you'd like to take back to the board, certainly at yesterday's engineering committee, there are a few things that obviously need to be discussed on a quicker scale than we anticipated, but if you have anything additional that you'd like me to take back to them, this is a good day to do that. Also our math counts, state winners went off to the national competition last week. They placed in the top 4/5 for the country, so we're very excited about that. That's a great opportunity. We fund five students and a coach to go to the national competition every year. It starts with hundreds of students that are chapters around the state, mathletes. That's a whole real title with T-shirts and the like, and then we move into a state competition, and then we send those to national. So getting there on that. 2 conventions I want to announce. Ashley is out of town this week, and so on Ashley's behalf and on AIA's behalf, please feel free to join them at the AIA convention, which will be July 30th to August 1st in Memphis. And then the Tennessee Engineers Conference will be September 27th to 29th at the Music City Center. So I look forward to having you all there. Thanks.
Good morning, I'm Don Baltimore, General Counsel and Lobbyist for Tennessee Interior Design Education and Advocacy. I'd like to say that we are pleased to have been able to work with all the professional associations and the board during the legislative session, and we all seem to have come out in pretty good shape. On the news front for the association, Tennessee IDEA awarded 6 interior design students in Tennessee's scholarship, or you can call it tuition, for the National Council of Interior Design Qualification, the NCIDQ exam, and so that they can continue their professional development. We call that the SLANT Award, SLANT, which stands for Student Leader Award for NCIDQ tuition. And I feel very good about the fact that we have started that, and it's rolling, and this was our first year to do that. Across the state, IIDA and ASID have continued to hold meetings, as well as Tennessee IDEA. And then meeting-wise and gathering, the post-NeoCon exhibitions, meetings, gatherings will be held in Nashville on July 13th and in Knoxville on July 20th. This is just kind of a post-assessment exhibition from the NeoCon exhibitions that are held in Chicago every year. No questions? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Whitley. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of Landscape Architects. As Casey noted, our legislative friends have finished their work for this year. They finished on May the 10th, which was a little later than usual. The lobbying corps was kind of excited when they finished in April, but that was partly because of the Improve Act. It's that the hard votes, it's a tax vote, so that was a hard bill to be able to count to 17 and 50 on probably the most most notable achievement of the session was that. And y'all know that in Tennessee we don't have debt for our highways and bridges program. No debt, it's pay as you go. So if you increase the fuel tax, the gas tax by 6 cents and the diesel tax by $0.10 a gallon, phased in over 3 years, that provides resources for the work that folks in this room do. So, and in Tennessee, we're a long, skinny state, so you need a good infrastructure to make things work well and attract good jobs. So infrastructure and education are, to me, the most important things that our state does. Mentioning our legislative friends leaving, they'll be back on January the 9th. They'll hit the ground running in that even-numbered year session because they have no organizational session. Their committees are set and ready to go. So the 2018 session will probably end earlier than this year's, and that will also lead to some election proctoring for folks, and that's already started. As soon as the session was over, gubernatorial candidates begin to announce and announcing and ponder announcing, and we'll continue seeing that as the summer goes along. Announced candidates are Randy Boyd from Knoxville, who we all know. He was the Commissioner of Economic and Community Development. Bill Lee from Franklin, a businessman. You see a lot of it's a high-profile HVAC company here based in Franklin, and then Carl Dean, the former mayor, on the Democratic side of the aisle. Those are the 3 announced candidates as of today. I promise you there will be others. Casey mentioned House District 95. Folks don't go vote in those elections, those special elections, those off-cycle elections. So if you know anybody in Shelby County that lives there, if 2,000 people vote, it will be a big turnout, so you should encourage your friends to vote. QBS is an ongoing educate. Every procurement is an opportunity to educate. I know we get frustrated when they do, but you can coach them up, just like Casey mentioned. If we engage with the cities and the counties when they stumble over that, it's an opportunity to remind them professional design services are not buying a box of pencils. It's not buying a box of pencils, so price is not going to be that element. For the conference, our group, so conference in September, the first full weekend in September, on September the 7th and 8th, and it's purely coincidence that that's a football weekend for the University of Tennessee, I'm sure. We've invited your own John Cothran to address the group this year, and he's agreed. We're excited about that. And that's all I have. Y'all are really kind to hear us out. Happy to respond to your questions or comments. Okay, thank you.
Chris, do you want to address someone? Congratulations, by the way. So, reports.
Good morning, members of the board. As Shalina mentioned, I did want to just clarify for you that unfortunately Matt Reddish is now leaving the department, but he is going to be transitioning to work with the contractors board and many of the other small programs. And Shalina Brown, who is fantastic and is actually a new supervisor on our legal team, is going to be joining us. And Shalina's been with the department like 8 years now. It's probably 4. I think Shalina will be an amazing asset to this board, and I look forward to working with her. But going forward, Matt will be taking care of cases that he has presented to you, and then in future cases on the legal board will be Shalina, just so that that's a little... And the first case today is Matt's case, so I'm turning to Matt.
Thank you. First case, 2017-014-10101. This is an architecture case, and the architecture firm that the architect works at. Complaint was opened by staff due to concerns that Respondent 1 architect and Respondent 2 architecture firm were engaging in unlicensed activity due to being named architect of record on a project despite Respondent 1's architect license application not yet being approved. A review of the complaint and response shows that Respondent 1 is a licensed California architect and works for Respondent 2, who is a design and development firm in California. Respondent 2 purchased a historical building in Memphis with plans to refurbish the building. Respondent 2 obtained the assistance of a local architect and code review specialist in Memphis to assist with the project. Tennessee Code Annotated 62-2-103, Subpart 2 creates an exemption for architects if they are not residents of Tennessee, have no established place of business in Tennessee, are in consultation with a registered architect in Tennessee, and are qualified to render such services in their own state. Respondents are residents of California with no established place of business in Tennessee. Respondents are consulting a properly registered architect firm with this project, and respondents are qualified to perform these services in California. For mitigating factors, I place that they meet the exception of Tennessee Code Annotated 62-2-103, Subpart 2, and in addition, the architect respondent 1 is now licensed with us. My recommendation is that we close this complaint.
Okay, do I hear a motion from the board that we accept the recommendation of legal counsel? Okay, is there a second? Second. Is there any further discussion? Steve?
Is this similar to what we've discussed in the past about the out-of-state engineer architect submitting on a request for proposals or qualifications? I don't really understand what this architect did in California architect.
Did a codes official turn him in?
It was actually referred to us through the commercial appeal. Yeah. They submitted a funding proposal, I think. They submitted some kind of proposal like that to, I think, Shelby County or the city of Memphis, and they were listed as architect of record. And they're listed as architect of record. Yeah, that's right. But this was unusual in that the architect was also the developer, which was often not the case, but in this case it was. Yeah, so
there's no state or federal funds that QBS would be involved in at this point?
No, QBS wouldn't be involved.
Okay. With an answer.
Did the architect propose to do architecture in Tennessee? I believe so. They submitted plans for what they wanted to do to the city, which is how the referral came to us, but they consulted with a registered architect in Memphis, which is why they come into the exception we have under our statute. I don't think that's what that exception means. But, I think someone doing engineering or architecture in Tennessee, for example, if a firm has a contract to do some work, professional services, and they have a specialty item that they need some special assistance or advice from a out-of-state person, they can consult with them. But that Tennessee license, he has to staff the work. So I'm not sure exactly where this falls, but I don't think that exception means you can consult and actually do the work without a Tennessee license.
So there was a work product created. Correct. Okay. And it was sealed.
I'm not sure of the seal on it. As John mentioned, I believe it was submitted as a funding proposal.
Yeah, he was licensed in March.
And they had been working.
Pretty need to see exactly what was submitted. If the thing that we have discussed many times in here is if a RFQ is put out, can a out-of-state licensee be on the team without first being licensed in Tennessee? And we've kind of went back and forth on that, and I really don't remember what we did. It seems like we're going to modify the rule, or maybe we have. I don't remember.
Well, in this
Process of amending it. Yeah. So right now, it's okay to do that?
well, they purchased the building, so it wasn't an RFP. The California architecture firm purchased the building, so I'm not disagreeing with you on this. That was what the
That's
fact
what
stated.
I don't know what was claimed or not claimed, or I just bring it up that it's.
Brian?
I guess maybe I put sentences in it, but I guess I thought that they just, they purchased the building, and the way they present themselves is they were the architect, but they actually did not do the work for it. But the way, I may be putting words in your mouth, but the way it was presented was that they were, but when they actually did the work, or now they're actually doing work, they've actually hired a Memphis or Tennessee architect. Is that true, or do you know?
We have hired a Memphis architect to consult with on the project. As I mentioned, they listed Respondent 1 as the architect of record on the funding proposal that was submitted. I'm not sure what work the consulting firm did and what work our respondent did in particular. But under the statute, it pretty clearly states that if you're acting with a consulting associate of an architect who's licensed in the state. So I'm not sure how that has been interpreted in the past by the board, but I think on the face, from the facts on this complaint, it fits squarely within that exemption.
And we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Robert?
Just one quick thing. I think that's, so I mean, to me it seems like it's going to be hard to determine what the California architect did versus what the Tennessee architect did on any set of plans, and it's a funding proposal. So I'm not sure if that fits into an RFQ. I mean, it's kind of very, very murky to the point where I'm not sure that we can put it in exactly from a proposal versus an RFQ box, but it looks like here in the statute that it's probably allowed, or at least they have good, I mean, you know, who did what when is going to be almost impossible to say. So it's different than somebody saying, well, this person did this person did that, they weren't licensed, this person was, I think, on this. So I tend to agree.
Is there any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Do we need a roll call vote since Susan's online? I just realized that.
I don't believe so. I think we have a physical quorum present. Right, John? Yeah, we have a physical quorum, so even if a person on the phone doesn't vote, we have enough to pass things along.
Okay. Moving forward, case number 2.
Case number 2, this is case number 2017-015631 involving an engineer. Complaint opened following respondent asking staff for update on their PE license because respondent wanted to sign and seal an engineering project soon. Following staff opening the complaint, respondent replied that the individual formerly in respondent's position was promoted but still in charge of signing and sealing plans until respondent became properly licensed. Legal contacted employer of respondent and obtained signed statements clarifying that respondent at no time had final approval authority or responsible supervision for any plan until respondent became fully licensed. Under mitigating factors, I believe this meets the exemption found in Tennessee Code Annotated 62-2-103, subpart 1. Additionally, our respondent is in the process of obtaining a license at the time of complaint. Additionally, respondent did not seal any plans. My recommendation on this is to close.
I'd like to make a motion to accept his recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Case 3, this is case 2017-01-8981 involving both engineering and a licensed land surveyor. This was reviewed by Mr. Stephen King
what I've included here is the review that Mr. King passed on to me, and his recommendation was he wanted to discuss this with the members of the board. So I'll go ahead and read his summary at this time. In this matter, the complainant is a municipal engineer and a PE in Tennessee, and the respondent is a registered land surveyor in Tennessee. The complainant reviewed plans for a car dealership expansion which included a parking lot and underground detention. The submitted sheets were title sheet C1, existing site, C2, site grading and drainage, C3, site details, and C4, stormwater management details. In the first submittal, the engineer only stamped the title sheet and the surveyor stamped C1, C2, C3, and C4. The surveyor later admitted those sheets were stamped by mistake in haste to submit plans for a permit. In the second submittal, the engineer and surveyor stamped the title sheet C1, C2, and C3, and the engineer stamped C4. However, the stormwater calculations were stamped by the engineer. In the first submittal, the respondent surveyor stamped drawings outside of land surveying. Those items include site grading design, erosion, and sediment control design, underground stormwater detention design, and a variety of details including pavement section, tree staking, curb, retaining wall, manhole, washdown pit, seed mixtures, erosion and sediment control, and underground detention. The surveyor's response noted that accepted practice by registered land surveyors includes the preparation of site plans, grading and drainage plans, road plan and profiles, as well as survey plats and subdivisions. Tennessee Code Annotated 62-18-102, Subpart 3, definition of the practice of land surveying states. Practice of land surveying means any service of work, the adequate performance of which involves the application of special knowledge of the principles of mathematics, the related physical and applied sciences, and the relevant requirements of law for adequate evidence to the act of measuring and locating lines, angles, elevations, natural and man-made features in the air, on the surface of the earth, within underground workings, and on the beds of bodies of water for the purpose of determining areas and volumes, for the monumenting of property boundaries, and for the platting and layout of lands and subdivisions of land, including topography, drainage, alignment, and grade sheets, for the preparation and perpetuation of maps, records, plats, field notes, records, and property descriptions that represent these surveys. In the second submittal, the surveyor's stamp alone was on sheet C3. The sheet site details include a pavement section and a retaining wall section. On the other sheet, stamped by both, there's no description of the work done by whom, the engineer or survey.
Mr. King, would you like to comment now?
Well, this is a fun one. Historically, there's been some controversy between civil engineers and land surveyors, and this is a prime example. And in our law, obviously we don't define engineering. The surveyors do define. They use a definition of land surveying that's very similar to the NCEES definition, but we don't have the NCEES definition of engineering in our law. So that's an issue. And I've talked to surveyors over my career about what they think is within their practice and what isn't. They read their definition, and I've included it there, where it says the layout of several things to be designed. I don't agree with that. I never have. Robert may want to weigh in on this because he's licensed both ways as a surveyor and an engineer. Oh, that's right. Yeah, your firm does both. Yeah, your dad does. But this particular surveyor submitted the drawings and stamped them all the first time, and then later admitted that he did a mistake, which is sort of surprising to me that could happen. The drawings were all done by by they all have the engineer's company name on them, so they evidently were produced at the engineer's firm, and the surveyor, not in the same office, stamped them first time. And as Matthew read, second time around, the engineer stamped the more appropriate drawings, but the surveyor stamp was still on some that I don't think is a part of the definition of surveying, which was there's a retaining wall, and the surveyor even refers to the retaining wall as a gravity wall. It's not even a gravity wall, it's a segmental wall. So obviously the surveyor didn't really know what he was stamping or didn't pay attention to it. But in his defense, he claims, although there's no note on the drawing to say this, that the wall was shown only as a reference that a wall was needed, and it was to be designed by the contractor. Well, there's nothing on the drawing that says that, but I understand that's how things are done sometimes. This gray area has always been a difficult thing between engineering and survey. But in the end, I think the biggest problem I see with this is, in the end, when the drawings were resubmitted after the municipal engineer brought these issues to their attention, even when they stamped both sheets, there wasn't a description about who did what work. So that's a fundamental problem, in my opinion, when there's multiple stamps on a sheet. Because how can we hold anyone responsible if we don't know who did what work? So I'm not sure that we don't need to open a complaint on the engineer, because the engineer also didn't designate what work he had done. That's why I said I'll leave it to the discussion of what to do about the registered manager later.
Sure, thank you. So I agree with your interpretation. I think surveying is not grading and drainage, okay? And I think the Attorney General has also weighed in on that as well, that it's not grading and drainage. They're certainly capable of laying those things out, provided they plan to lay it out, and I believe that's what their law says, right?
Not your stake out.
Correct. Yeah. Not lay it out on a piece of paper, but lay it out on the ground. Because again, I think the Attorney General's been pretty clear that it doesn't include the design of grading and drainage. And so I don't see how you don't come up with that thing from there. So he makes a mistake, I got it, but then he comes back and almost like he's trying to cover for a mistake, which kind of gets you thinking, well, did you really just make a mistake, or did you know what you were doing and try to get through on something, which seems to me to be more the case. And I agree with you, he did stamp a sheet improperly, but the engineer himself didn't stamp 3 sheets that they were supposed to stamp when they submitted this, and they produced the sheets. I mean, it's not very difficult in this world of electronic media to stamp and sign something and send it to somebody. I mean, it's just not that difficult. So I agree with you. I think we ought to, I mean, to me it looks like the engineer's also been negligent to sign, or not negligent is probably a legal word, but they should have signed the sheets in the first place they were responsible for. And I think the surveyor is definitely somebody that didn't do the right thing. Does this rise to some, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like it's $100 fine and a letter of warning or caution or something to me. But I mean, that's because I can who did what. Sometimes we all get those kind of forget to document exactly where we are. So I'm not as, but he's absolutely wrong on the layout part of that. I mean, it's just we've got the Attorney General saying that he's wrong. It's not me saying that. So.
In this particular municipality, they have in their stormwater ordinance, they require that the drainage work be done by an engineer, which is common with some cities.
With a clarifying question of staff,
what's our purview over constituents? Because the surveying board is the surveying board over the surveyor, correct? So why was the complaint, and I think I get why the complaint was brought to the AE board, but is there also a complaint appropriate in the surveying board that might be more appropriately placed there?
I think we can always refer it to their board, and they can make the determination if they want to open a complaint or not.
This is my 2 cents, and the reason I asked the question is it strikes me that might be a more appropriate place because of their history, experience, and you know, their constituents, their registrants. And then if there was a complaint against the engineer, that would be more appropriate in our...
That was what I was going to suggest, or I'm not sure if there's a precedent for this. Surely this has come up before, but it seems like that before this board took an action against the registrant of another board, we might want to see what that board thinks about it.
Yeah, in great part because have we had these things before where a contractor, for instance, submitted a set of documents and I can't remember if we decided we had jurisdiction or not, and I think we decided that we had to send it back to the contractor board because we weren't, and I've always been confused about that because it seems that if they're doing something against our law, we ought to have some recourse for that, but I think we've been told in the past to send it back to the, yeah, well, I mean, I think it's some, you know, we're putting that to another board when it's, we've had this discussion on contractors before, I know, and we decided, I can't remember, John, if we decided we can't do anything because we don't license them, or a developer that's got, we've had this discussion, I know we have, but it's like a developer will change a set of plans and we can't do anything because, but we can, but we can't, so I'm curious.
Thinking of a case where the owner applied a title to some plans.
And parking lot.
I don't know if that really relates to this case so much, but yeah, I know which case you're talking about.
But he's not our registrant.
Yeah.
So we've kind of been told that we can only deal with the people that are our registrants, so no, yes.
Not if it's unlicensed practice.
You can look at all those. I mean, if anybody's practicing engineering, that's it just strikes me that since there is a board that oversees.
So, Mr. King, would you like to make a final recommendation?
I would suggest that we refer the complaint on the surveyor to the surveyor's board, and that we open a complaint on the engineer.
Make a motion.
I can make a motion. Okay. I can make a suggestion.
Okay. Yes.
Just a clarification, the issue becomes when the surveyor lays out the site, they are shifting into engineering. Is that how I understand? With laying out the site on paper, they're allowed to do.
The surveyor is allowed to lay out the site on the ground, but not lay it out in a CAD drawing or a piece of paper, because that's basically what the Attorney General has said, is that's the practice of design is grading and drainage design, which you have to put on paper before you can get it on the dirt. And so I'll make a motion.
I've got one more
comment.
Okay. Kathy?
I was just wondering, relative to the surveyor's response that's excerpted from, I saw an email, it says, the surveyor's response noted that, quote, accepted practice by registered land surveys includes preparation of site plans, grading, drainage plans, etc. In other words, he's saying it is, regardless of what the law says, quote unquote, accepted practices, we do this stuff all the time. And I think if you go on to read the definition as the staff attorney provided, that's clearly not what the law says. And so he's presuming that standard practice overrules what the law explicitly states in his response. I would suggest or ask the question, is there any way that we can at least go back to him with your definition of accepted practices does not define whether or not you have stayed within your lanes, even if we refer him, because to me this is definitely what I've heard this before many times, and well, this is what we always do. But I think as a minimum, I'd feel more comfortable with some type of response to what was apparently his. If he put it in writing, he feels pretty strongly about it. Hey man, we do this all the time. This is no big deal.
You can definitely do a letter of instruction, letter of caution, letter of warning, whichever one you feel would be appropriate.
Before it's actually resolved, before it's resolved, or is that as part of
what we've kind of discussed with referral to Land Surveyor Board, opening a complaint against the engineer? We still need to address this particular complaint. We either need to close or a letter of warning or a civil penalty in addition to the referral and the complaint opened.
I just wonder what the options were. Thank you.
I would suggest that we postpone action on that and see if the surveyors board does anything. Before we, in essence, call them out on the carpet, let's see what their interpretation is. I suspect we're not going to agree, but let's let them respond, and then we'll have to. I think the courteous thing to do is to see what they say about it first, since it is their registrant, and keep this complaint open until we hear from them, because if they respond in a way that we don't agree with, we may take a different action.
And that's kind of what I was going to do in a motion, if we have to have a motion to refer. I was just going to, my motion would be based on the Attorney General's opinion that the surveyor appears to have been practicing engineering, but we would like for the Surveyors Board to validate that and to validate that writing, or that what the Attorney General has stated in reviewing this case. I mean, I think we need to send it back with some language that we're not basing it on what we think, we're basing it on what, again, we've got an Attorney General opinion that says that. Again, so it doesn't get into what general practice is or whatever, which I think is just a cover-up, but that's just me. So I don't know if we can send it back with that kind of language and still keep it open.
Do you like to send a letter of information explaining to them what the statute actually says, and at the same time
refer the case to the Land Surveyors Board?
Understood.
Okay.
So I think my motion,
we don't want to actually close.
No, we want to keep the case open pending action of the land. So my motion would be keep the case open pending action of the Land Surveyors Board, but send the case to the Land Surveyors Board with instruction from us that says, based on the Attorney General's opinion of the definition of land surveying and engineering and related to grading and drainage, and I may be saying this a little wordy, we believe the surveyor is in violation of that opinion.
Here's something I think we can do, because when we open this against the engineer, I would ask that you provide me some questions to have them answer, either from the board or maybe Mr. Keene can provide them, so we can get some clarity maybe on who did what and who stamped what and who did that why, because we haven't actually had those discussions with our respondents. So perhaps one of those questions to the land surveyor could be, here's an Attorney General's opinion, why do you feel this doesn't apply to you?
We can't interview the land surveyor because they're not correct.
No, if we send an investigator, we can have the investigator ask some questions, even create semi-interrogatories, things along those lines. Okay. If we suspect that they engage in unlicensed engineering, we can certainly investigate them.
Okay.
And get more information that way. That way we can let them know that AG opinion is there, get a response from them.
That could be a motion to give to y'all some, is my motion messed up, or do I need to kind of rephrase that since I'm obviously...
I believe the motion can be table this case to next meeting, refer to Land Surveyor Board, open complaint against engineer, investigate Land Surveyor and engineer for next meeting.
So that's my motion, is that we table this case until we get answers, the appropriate answers, because it may not be next meeting, but the appropriate answers, and that we refer the case back to the Land Surveyors Board and allow our investigator to do some more investigation and open a complaint against the engineer of this case as well. Is that good?
Do I have a second? Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Matt.
I believe Sarah's cases will start now, and Mr. King, I'll be in touch with you, and we'll try to get some good questions to send to them. Thank you.
Well, number 4 on the legal report is 2017-016341. This is, again, this complaint was opened as a result of respondent staff reaching out to check on the status of respondent's pending application for a license via reciprocity. In one of, Comedy here. In one of the emails, staff wrote from the respondent, "Can you kindly let me know if respondent, can you use this number to seal the drawings?" Staff opened the complaint due to the above sentence implying respondent had offered services prior to obtaining a license. Respondent participated in an investigation by the department to determine whether respondent had offered services. Respondent stated the developer had contacted respondent about a project in Tennessee, and respondent provided evidence that respondent applied for licensure the next day. The project was ultimately held up while respondent's application was processed. Respondent did not produce drawings, but did do some early reviews of codes while working with the project's design team. The investigation confirmed that drawings were not produced until after respondent was licensed. Mitigating factors here is there was no consumer harm. This was a board-generated complaint. The respondent in this matter is now actively licensed. The respondent was also incredibly cooperative in the investigation and was approached by a client, and the client was informed at that first initial meeting confirmed via email that the client was told that they would need to have a license, and that was taken into consideration in the timeline. So I think that there's some question here as far as when they started working with the design team, and I was never able to confirm whether there was a licensed architect on that team. I got this investigation back honestly 2 days ago, so I wasn't able to do any follow-up. However, I think in this case that this is not what we anticipated when we say that we're trying to prevent someone from offering services. So I think this is more in line with what our new rule will say. So I recommended closure here.
We have a recommendation from legal counsel. Do I hear a motion? We accept their recommendation.
Make the motion we accept.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thanks, Sam.
Next one is entry 5. This is 2017-020531. This is also a licensed engineer. The complainant is a building inspector. Complainant alleges respondent failed to incorporate building codes into a report regarding the soil conditions of a footing and slab. Respondent responded and stated respondent works in soil engineering and mechanics, geotechnical engineering. Respondent states the report serves a different purpose than what the building codes inspector is responsible for. Respondent claims the building inspector is overstepping the bounds of the inspector's role, and others have complained of the same. This matter was reviewed by Mr. Stephen King, and Mr. King concluded that the respondent produced the report respondent was hired to produce regarding soil composition, and Mr. King did not identify any violations. And I think in this one, if anyone Robert King, I see you there, might recuse from this one, but I also turn it over to Mr. King if he has any additional commentary on this matter.
The complainant in this case is a building inspector, and the complainant included some photographs where of the foundation, and evidently quoted a code that this is for a residential structure, that the footing or the bearing soil must be undisturbed. But in my reading, what the geotechnical engineer was asked to do was to determine if the foundation and bearing capacity of the soil was adequate. And the report that was done, and it seems to me that the engineer analyzed it appropriately and concluded that the foundation was okay. I think the building inspector is quoting some codes, and I don't know whether they have a direct bearing in this situation or not, but I know there are many structures built on soil that isn't natural virgin soil, and we have a very reputable geotechnical engineer that says this is adequate for this. I think it was a detached garage. So I didn't see any reason to go any farther with it, so I recommend that it be closed.
This time, the legal counsel recommended that we close this case. Is there a motion to accept that recommendation?
Motion to approve the recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Sarah.
And let the record note that I have a recusal, please. I'll worry more about this case than all.
Susan, if you don't mind, will you just state your vote for the record since we have Robert recused?
Snyder? Hello? Oh, she wants to step down. So we don't have
a quorum on that. We can circle back around. We'll come back around to that one.
John, you want to see if you get her back on the phone? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry. Ms. Madden?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We didn't hear your vote on the last case that was...
And Vanessa heard her as well, so.
Oh, guess you did vote.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
This is for clarity. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
That's okay, sorry.
No, it's not worried. The next entry should be 6. Sorry about that. I've got it labeled as 5 again. 2017-024021. This is a architect. There is a history here, but it's actually related to this case. On the consent calendar, there was a letter of caution because this is a reciprocal discipline case. So we received notice from Alabama that they had taken action against this architect based on the same thing I'm going to describe, but Alabama chose to do something less than suspension, revocation. I think they just issued a letter. So in that case, we closed the complaint generated by that in the letter of caution. This complaint was opened as a result of Mississippi suspending respondent's right to practice. Respondent's Mississippi license was suspended for 2 years, and respondent was ordered to pay $7,500 in penalties. The Mississippi State Board of Architecture brought charges against respondent for plan stamping 3 separate projects. The first project was an update or renovation of an automobile dealership. Respondent was contacted by an architect that was not licensed in Mississippi. The unlicensed architect asked respondent to stamp plans for the architect. The board concluded respondent was aware that the unlicensed architect was in fact unlicensed and that the board had sent that unlicensed architect a cease and desist letter. Respondent claimed respondent acted as the architect of record, but the board found that respondent provided the unlicensed architect's phone number to a building official instead of respondent's number. Respondent never met with the owner of the contractor and in fact did not know who the owner of the property was. And respondent did not maintain any records to show respondent independently reviewed the plans and conducted any sort of collaborative work with the unlicensed architect. The second project was for the adaptation of prototypical drawings of a donut shop to fit site conditions and codes. Respondent was contacted for the property by an unlicensed architect. Respondent knew the unlicensed architect was unlicensed in Mississippi, but believed the unlicensed architect was licensed in Tennessee. That architect is actually not licensed in Tennessee. Respondent did not prepare the plans, and after 2 meetings with the unlicensed architect over the phone, stamped the plans. Respondent never met the owner of the property, and no record of reviews were produced. The third project was for the same unlicensed architect from the Donut Shop project. Respondent claims respondent conducted a technical review of plans for a dentist's office. The unlicensed architect was recorded as the designer of the project. Respondent stated respondent merely reviewed the plans for health, safety, and welfare because drawing was labor-intensive. Respondent sealed the plans. Respondent argued at the hearing that the board in Mississippi lacked jurisdiction over 2 of the 3 projects due to Mississippi law exempting certain buildings under a certain size from board oversight. The board made arguments as to why that would not apply to respondent in its order, but ultimately decided it would assess discipline and find violations based on the first project only without going into the other 2 projects. Tennessee has similar language that exempts certain buildings from requiring a licensed architect. Our law does not remove the board's jurisdiction if a licensed architect does choose to take on those projects and seal them. Mitigating factors, serving discipline in Mississippi where violations actually occurred. Aggravating factors, there's multiple violations, a threat to health, safety, and welfare, an outcome likely more severe under Tennessee law. At this time, I would recommend an authorization of a 6-month suspension of respondent's Tennessee license to be settled by consent order or formal hearing.
Do we have a recommendation from the board? Are there any motions?
First, let me just ask, so the work that they did in Tennessee, is that the donut deal that they did?
None of this was actually took place in Tennessee.
Oh,
there is a Tennessee, I will say, the Mississippi order is interesting because they take some time at the end of the order from the board to explain that they believe, in addition to what I've recorded here, respondent does work for a corporation in Memphis, and in addition to to the respondent's practice. And the board, on a tangent, if you will, explained that in the respondent's full-time job, his respondent's job is to stamp prototypical drawings and review them for franchises that are across the nation, but the way that they seal those projects is with like a clear stamp. So there was a lot of tie-in to Tennessee in the Mississippi order related to that, but they ultimately didn't find any violations. They implied that maybe his employment for this corporation would be a violation of our laws. I thought that at this point we're kind of in a hole with him anyway, with the respondent anyway. I'm so sorry. However, the unlicensed architect that the respondent worked with on 2 of those projects is a respondent that I call that person a respondent because that unlicensed architect is problematic in this state as well. So while all of this action took place in Mississippi, I think this person showed as the board described it itself, a conscious disregard for the standard of care when it comes to architecture and a conscious disregard for the health, safety, and welfare responsibilities of an architect. In addition, the fact that the respondent was working with an unlicensed architect that is a continued problem in this state made me conclude that a suspension would be worthwhile despite the projects not occurring inside Tennessee.
Mississippi is doing for 2 years and we're doing for 6 months.
That might be a good offset. I'm very flexible on this. Honestly, I was not quite sure on the best recommendation. I felt that was severe enough, but also addressed the fact that this didn't occur here. I want the person to, be the same 2 years Mississippi's doing, just like we're following theirs, as opposed to 6 months later they can come to Tennessee to work, because we do feel about selling the stamp is what we call it. But I don't know, is that something unusual of the board to have something that's, because I feel like we ought to just match Mississippi, since it's, all these allegations were in Mississippi, but I'd hate for I'm done with this, I can't, 6 months I can go to Tennessee now, but. Definitely understand. I have seen it in other cases where we could issue an indefinite suspension pending compliance with Mississippi or have your license become in good standing in Mississippi. So that is something I have seen with another respondent when I first started here.
Not like that. Anybody else that over a history of our board, does that sound comfortable with everyone else?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a good thing, because I agree with you. He didn't design anything in Tennessee, but certainly the way he was going about it I don't know that we want him as an active registrant in the state of Tennessee with that history until he pays some sort of, not pays, but until he has some sort of punishment for acting poorly in another state. So I certainly think that language sounds good to me, and we'll have to repeat it in the form of a motion if we make it, because I didn't catch all of it, but that did sound correct.
I'll make the motion, but if you would repeat that one more time.
I think what you want your motion to be would be the authorization of an indefinite suspension with the ability for that suspension to be lifted upon proof that the license is in good standing in Mississippi.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for an indefinite suspension based off of Mississippi's, his state, Mississippi, and impending their renewal or his reactivation of his license.
Okay. The motion's been presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? I do have one question. Since he's been penalized in Mississippi, we're not penalizing, we're just saying you're suspended to get your business straightened up over there.
That's why I recommended it. I thought Mississippi probably was owed that penalty here. Okay. I didn't want to interfere with it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Clarification. So when Mississippi reapproves this individual for licensure, then it would become automatic in Tennessee. Will we be notified by the state of Mississippi, or how will this work?
Usually, Frances Smith with our staff is excellent at checking with other states and communicates actively. And I know that when she knows that this is pending, she'll probably keep an eye on that and flag it. But we will include language in the consent order. What I like to do is I make it the respondent's responsibility to inform us, and then we would confirm with the board after that. There's been cases where people have the ability to lift their suspension, but they never inform us, and we leave them indefinitely suspended until they send a letter and let us know. So. We could also require them to appear before the board and kind of explain that they're in good standing in Mississippi. It's another thing.
Do they not have to reapply?
Well, at that point,
While they're suspended, they still have to renew the license. If they don't renew it, then they would have to reapply, but otherwise they don't.
I think we need to add that to our response to them. Okay. To say what the condition is for them to be reinstated for Tennessee. Okay. Is there any other discussion? Excuse me, Stephen.
The problem, unlicensed architect you mentioned, but we have other complaints, or are we working on that architect?
yes, there's actually a complaint in the tubes right now for this individual.
No discussion. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Does anybody need a break? If not, we'll keep moving. Did Ann have to move?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
She had to leave. So
Okay.
she had another appointment.
Okay. Do you want 5 minutes more? Right. No. I'll just take a 5-minute break, and let's keep it 5 minutes, okay?
Don't be embarrassed.
Hey, are we recording again? Okay, thank you. At this time, John is going to present his director's report.
Yes, and the data you'll be looking at begins on page 53 on your iPads, or 50 if you're looking at what I sent out. So either 50 or 53. So while you're turning to that, I'll give my oral report. On National Council meetings, Robert Campbell attended the NCEES Northeast Southern Zone Joint Interim Meeting in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands on April 27th through the 29th. He did bring some souvenirs, so we thank him for that.
I understand not to the level that I was supposed to.
They were cheap souvenirs.
They were cheap. Laura got the best one.
Which I need to take out my clothes that you not lose this.
the thought that counts. Also, Rick Thompson, Brian Tibbs, Frank Waxter, Sarah Page, and I will be attending the NCARB annual meeting in Boston, Massachusetts later this month, June 22nd through the 24th. And I have submitted a travel request for 5 engineer members and 2 staff persons to attend the NCAAS annual meeting in Miami Beach, Florida on August 23rd through the 26th. And 4 of the engineer members will be funded by NCAAS, so only 3 of those will actually be state funded. And the request will be submitted in the near future for Blair Parker and I to attend the CLARB annual meeting, which will be held in Boise, Idaho, on September 14th through the 16th of this year. As far as outreach efforts, I did assist in proctoring the PE exams in Nashville on April 21st and 22nd. They had a candidate that needed special accommodations, so they needed some assistance proctoring, so I helped them with that. As you know, the latest edition of the board's newsletter has been distributed. It took a long time to get that one out, but we finally made it. I spoke on enforcement actions at K.S. Ware & Associates, Kathy's firm, last month. She invited me for that because she does a training session for her employees each Monday.
Yes, and you did a great job, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And let's see, Nathan already mentioned that he's contacted me about speaking at the ASLA Tennessee annual conference in September. And I also received an invitation to speak at a meeting of the Eastern chapter of the Tennessee Building Officials Association on September 13th in Knoxville. I will not be able to attend that because I'll be traveling to Boise, Idaho for the CLARB meeting. So Robert Campbell and Stephen King have volunteered to speak at that event. So as far as I know, that's still planned. I don't think they have the exact location yet, but it will be in Knoxville. So. September 13th. Yeah. As far as administrative issues, I know at least one of you is already aware of this. As part of the Governor's Alternative Workplace Solutions Initiative, AWS as it's called, board staff will begin working from home 3 days a week beginning in August. And this initiative is intended to allow greater flexibility for employees, a reduction in office space square footage, and also consequently a cost savings, and also increased productivity is the hope at least. The pilot program within the department is beginning this month. The accountancy board is part of that pilot program, and we will be part of the second phase of implementing this plan. Most of our applications, renewals, and other documents are now received electronically, and our new licensing system is web-based, so I don't anticipate this being a difficult transition for us. And I anticipate all employees will all be together in the office 1 day a week, and then the rest of the week we'll have it staggered, but we'll always have at least one employee in the office each day. So the staff's clearly very excited about that prospect, so we're looking forward to that. I'm sure there'll be some challenges with implementing it, but I think we can easily work through those. But rest assured, if you call our numbers or if you come by our office, there'll be somebody there clearly to greet you or to answer the phones at all times. So it should, as far as the public's concerned, it should be completely seamless. They shouldn't notice any difference. That's what we hope, at least. All right. Licensing, any questions on that?
What day did you say that meeting that we're supposed to present?
September 13th.
That's what I didn't have on my calendar.
Okay, I don't know the exact time. I don't think they've provided that yet, but...
WS is prodding us to sign up. When do you think you'll have approval?
I think I submitted the request week before last. It's in the tubes.
They've given us a deadline of when we have to register.
Oh, for funded delegates?
Correct.
Okay.
And get our...
I'm hopeful within the next 2 weeks we should have approval on it.
That'll be close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the 30 email this week.
Yeah, okay. And we submitted it, very shortly after they sent the materials out for the meeting, so... Yeah, is it? Okay.
But I can go ahead and make hotel reservations.
Well, you can go ahead and make hotel reservations, right? Just not the final arrangements.
It's not charging us.
I don't don't anticipate any problems with it receiving approval, but the fact that we're sending a total of 7 people might be problematic. I don't know. They may come back and say we prefer that you send fewer delegates to the meeting. I'm not sure, but hopefully with most of them being funded by NCWS, I don't anticipate a problem with it. Anything else? Okay, licensing data, page 53 or 50. This just gives you the number of registrants and firms, and the numbers remained pretty steady since the last meeting, certainly. And then behind that, you have the number of licensure applications reviewed and approved, just for your information. And behind that, the next page are open complaints, and this just gives you a snapshot of all of our complaints as of May the 23rd. You'll see that at the bottom there, the number over 180 days old without clock stopping action is 0%. That's kind of the standard metric that our department uses. Generally they want clock stopping action on all complaints within 180 days, and clock stopping action would be like issuing a consent order, authorizing a formal hearing, or something of that nature, just where the board takes action on the complaint. We do have 2 hearings authorized to be heard by the board currently. At this time, we had 1 in investigations, but that's now out of investigations. That was presented at this meeting. And our percent on time in the last 18 months is 95.71%, so still doing very well there. And any questions on that?
I have an idea when the hearings will be.
I don't know.
One of them is a voluntary revocation I anticipate will be signed. Do you have anyone? Check the other one. They're probably both consent orders from the last meeting, and then what happens is after 30 days is spent, if it's been signed, it automatically goes to formal hearing, but often they're still settled, so it's not in place yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, behind that report, you have the financial data for the 3rd quarter of the fiscal year. As far as revenue goes, our licensing revenue for the 3rd quarter increased about $64,000 from the 3rd quarter of fiscal year 2016, which reflects an increase in applications and continued normalization of revenue following the implementation of our new licensing system. When we implemented our new system, we sent out a bunch of early bird renewal notices, so that kind of disrupted our revenue for a period of time. One year we had a whole lot more revenue than the next year, but we're kind of normalizing still at this point. As far as expenses go, really no dramatic differences, largely consistent. The main difference is that we provided more grant funds this fiscal year, $331,700 versus, what was it the last year? I think it's $308,700 last year, so we did see an increase in our expenditures, but mainly it's because of our increase in the grants with the special projects grant that we provided. And our year-to-date reserve balance is $393,930, which, if you add it to our accumulated reserve, puts us, close to $2 million, but it won't be that much left over at the end of the year because we still have cost backs to deduct for legal costs, department costs, the customer service center that handles a lot of our phones currently. We'll have to deduct those at the end of the fiscal year, so we won't actually have that large of a surplus when it's all said and done. So, questions?
It's just a comment. NCWS, when you went through grants, that reminded me. We are the only, just to be proud as a board, I heard a lot of reports from the other states about what they're doing. Nobody's giving money back on the scale that we're giving money back to our universities to help promote the next generation of architects, engineers, other technical professionals. And I really think that's obviously there's a historical thank you to people that started that a long time ago, but there's also a thank you to you as a board to continue doing that, continue to reinvest in the next generation. Again, everybody was present at this annual meeting for the first time, or this Southern Zone meeting for the first time. And when they gave the reports, there was a little this, a little that, we're redoing all this, but nobody was giving back. And so I just think that's a cool thing for our board to understand that we stand alone when it comes, it's cool to stand up and say, oh, by the way, we're increasing from $300,000 to $350,000 next year to give back to our students and universities to promote that. And the other ones are trying to figure out, what day of the week to meet on or something. I mean, it just was not very, anyway, I just wanted y'all to understand. I mean, that's basically doing more than that.
Thank you.
Questions?
Is that everything?
Yep, that's everything for the director's report.
All righty. Legislative update.
Okay, that's me too. Page 63 on your iPads, or 66. If you're looking at what I distributed, which would be Ms. Mayer.
I'm looking at it.
All right, there you go. Legislative update. It's entitled pending legislation, but a lot of these are not pending anymore, so I guess I should change that title. The first one, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. The first one, House Bill 300, Senate Bill 1188, is now Public Chapter 226. It did pass. This was just a housekeeping change, which we've gone over multiple times before, where instead of requiring that engineer applicants be certified as an engineer intern, that's changed to state that they must have passed the FE exam, which is essentially the same thing. We're just taking away the formal certification part, since some states don't certify engineer interns. That was a problem for some of our applicants. And you do have the public chapter attached following the summary sheet. The second one there, House Bill 597, Senate Bill 329, is the master's degree legislation that's already been mentioned. It did pass with an amendment that increases the experience requirement for engineers with an acceptable master's degree to 20 years. And also, it will sunset June 30th, 2019, and this takes effect July 1st of this year, so that's when it will be effective. It is Public Chapter 348, and you have the text of the bill attached. Next is House Bill, at the bottom of that page, House Bill 326, Senate Bill 1217. It's passed, and it is now a Public Chapter 230. It was amended, I think, partly to address some concerns with the legislation, and that this board did express concerns about it as well. This is the legislation that provides active state supervision of board actions to protect boards from antitrust lawsuits. And of course, this was a reaction to the North Carolina Dental Supreme Court decision. We have several privilege tax bills filed this year, which were all deferred to next year, so they're not dead. Obviously, they'll carry over to next year, so keep your fingers crossed. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? And then the very last one, the last page of the summary sheet, House Bill 566, Senate Bill 449, passed as amended as Public Chapter 215. That requires that guides to practice be adopted by rule. It only applies as amended to guides that must be complied with to maintain a license to practice, such as codes of ethics. And it does not apply to exams, it specifically states. And I've talked to legal counsel some about this. They don't feel that it would have much of an impact on our board, but certainly some boards it does have an impact. Yeah. That's all I have there. Unless you have any questions.
Sorry, one more thing on I know we had the Masters of 20 Years Experience bill. We may need to reach out to at some point in time. NCAAS has got some information about why the master's thing is not a good idea, as well as technology degrees and others. And one of the comments was made was there's no design criteria required for the masters, and I'm messing this up, but anyway, there were some statements made at the meeting, and there were some other statements made that they have some information about why it's not a good idea to not have the undergraduate be ABET accredited in engineering, and why engineering technology degrees are also bad ideas. So that statement was made by somebody, and I wrote it down somewhere, but it basically, I think, a design component was not there. So we may want to try to reach out to those people, and I'll try to find my notes. I thought I may have put it in my report, but that should have been into the part about Jerry Carter getting married, and I got a little confused.
Yeah, it was in your notes that you sent me on the meeting. Yeah, you did put it in there. Also, just not really related to this, but somewhat related, on the privilege tax, we received a communication from Revenue, some of you may have gotten it, that they extended the deadline to pay the tax this year to June 30th because they've had so many problems with their new payment system and a backlog of calls and emails, so they had to delay the due date for that. So just for your information, if you haven't paid it yet, you're not late at this point. If you don't pay it today, you're not late. So that's it.
Are we ready for the engineering committee report?
We had a robust engineering committee meeting, as always, and still managed to get out on time, I think. Not early. We had a lot going on. The first thing was we had a visit by Carter Lawrence, the new those chimes, gotcha. The new assistant commissioner, Carter Lawrence, who wanted to come and be edified on the subject of decoupling. So we spent a number of minutes talking about decoupling and summarizing some of the conversations, and Casey was there, and we talked about really the gist of it was the need for collaboration as we move forward, which may be something we're looking at now, but the professional associations and the administration to move forward. That was important to the board. So it was a good conversation. We also had a visit by Roy Shrewsbury, who is the Northeastern Zone Vice President for NCWS, who came to visit our board, is doing likewise with other boards, and wanted to discuss some questions that we had posed to NCWS and to encourage our participation and commitment. This board is particularly committed to going to, attending, and learning from NCWS. We use those connections. I know staff is well connected with those resources and for there, and we gave him some input from our perspective. In matters of the motions, we determined that we were not going to change the continuing education requirements for engineering audits that are for continuing education relative to health, safety, and welfare requirements being specified, and that we didn't feel that change was necessary, that we felt like the rigors of the continuing education was appropriate, that our audit of those seemed to really not unveil any problems that needed to be fixed. So felt like that was something we didn't need to do. We did formally issue a letter of concern regarding proposed changes to the ABET criteria, and basically because felt like some of the proposed changes might construe a reduction in academic rigor. So we formally sent a letter of concern. We talked about and adopted changes to criteria for the fulfillment of humanities and social sciences deficiencies. We incorporated additional guidance, and again, this is kind of policy guidance for avenues for alternative credit, including professional publications, presentations, and other activities that we felt could supplant the credit transcript credit. And this was spearheaded by Campbell and King, and we appreciate the work on that because that was very, very well done. We talked again about, a little bit further about electronic seals. Basically got an update from Robert about an electronic seals policy, and that he is gathered more information in NCWS, and has a meeting, I believe, today with TDOT to discuss that further and look at some forward-thinking policy on electronic seals. We talked again about energy engineers, and as this issue of this area of practice that may be constituting engineering without a license was brought forth as a discussion by a board member, and legal had looked into it, that it was warrants opening a complaint for further information and study. And that was the work of the engineering committee yesterday. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. At this time, Mr. Parker.
The landscape architect committee met yesterday afternoon, and in a similar fashion, I believe, as the engineering group session they had regarding PDHs and the definition of health, safety, and welfare. We walked away at the end of the meeting. There were two recommendations, I believe, that we said that we back to the board. First and foremost, explore the opportunity or whether or not we want to increase the amount of health, safety, and welfare required hours. Currently, it's a majority, as I'm stating this correctly. So when you submit your biannual information, which in this case would be 13 hours, and the question of whether or not we want to increase that, go a little bit higher. I don't think we're not inclined at this moment to say 100% of our PDHs. We do not want 100% of our PDHs to be health, safety, and welfare related or necessary, because there are other instances where other educational opportunities may be a very healthy thing for these landscape architects. And so right now I'm going to come back to the committee and direction whether we leave it at a majority of health, safety, and welfare hours, something a little bit higher than that. I will not come back with 100% of recommendation. That was the first item. The second item is it's specific to the experience requirement under a registered landscape architect. As Tennessee law reads, it's my understanding that we must have more than 2 years. Did I phrase that correctly?
Not less than 2.
Not less than 2. Not less than 2 years. And yet, the Council of Landscape Architecture Registration Boards, CLARB, recommends that actually their gold standard, as John would phrase it, is 3 years. As a practicing landscape architect for the many years I've been registered, I've always heard it's 3 years. So you have to work under a registered LA for 3 years. And that is, I believe, most LA landscape architects in the state of Tennessee would agree with that. I doubt that many landscape architects with that attitude have actually looked at the rule, because the rule very clearly states the 2 years. But CLARB recommends 3 years, and I don't know why we would not want to match up with CLARB. And it's my understanding we have not yet had a problem where an applicant has come through the doors and challenged this difference. But I'm wondering, why don't we match it up and get it taken care of? So our recommendation of our committee was to go back, explore that, and come back next time with a recommendation and possibly look to change that rule.
Questions? Thank you. All right, John, we're back up again.
Okay, action items. It's on page 77 on your iPads, or page 80. These are from the last meeting. I did complete, well, except for the reference manual, did complete all of the items under my name, did send changes to the EAC ABET criteria to the engineering deans in the state for comment. Only received one comment, unfortunately, but that was distributed to all the deans. Of course, we did complete revision of the engineer committee policy regarding fulfillment of humanities, social sciences, general education deficiencies. We've notified the schools about the grant application deadline being earlier this year. So it's your reference manual revisions. That's a continual item that we're looking at. And for legal counsel, they did, their items are later on the agenda, so I'll just note that these continuing education rule changes that were discussed by the board at the last meeting will be presented. The plan is to present them in August for the continuing education committee to review and discuss. So those are in the works. Ricky Versailles did draft a letter that was reviewed by the engineer committee yesterday, and the engineer and landscape architect committees took care of their charge about discussing the HSW requirements for continuing education. The CE committee will meet in August. We have not yet been asked for our legislative proposals. That may be in August, potentially July, August when they ask for those, but we will submit the proposal that y'all approved at the last meeting when those are requested. And as far as the October agenda topics, I do have 3 items that y'all have identified to discuss in October. Discuss definitions of practice and incidental practice provisions, the experience requirement for landscape architects that Blair just discussed, and also discussing special project grants and the proposal to increase the grants appropriation. So if you have any other ideas for topics.
I will be gone in October, so unless we move the date.
Right.
What's the date still? October 5th? The reason I ask is that's Vanderbilt's reunion. Are we still having it on Vanderbilt campus?
Yeah, they've confirmed that they'll do it for us. I think they've got a room reserved for us on the dates we have. Let me look.
That's what I have.
Okay.
The reunion is October 4th, but the big day is this Saturday, so.
Yep, October 4th, 5th, 6th. Of course, we'll be meeting, Wednesday afternoon starting at 1, and those are just committee meetings. And then a whole day Thursday, and then just the morning on Friday, which will be the actual board meeting.
I need the rest from them. Stuff on campus during the evening, the rest.
And that's it for action items.
Sure, so we can turn it over into the legal part of that if you'd like. I know on the agenda, the next item is quality-based selection FAQs. Those are located on your iPad on page 82 or 79 of the packet. Liz has worked to incorporate some of the concerns as far as providing more concrete answers on some of the questions, particularly 8, 9, and 10. So what you have in front of you are the same changes that you saw last time, with the addition of an actual generally yes, generally no, inserted into those questions that were identified as feeling that they were too ambiguous in the way that they were presented by legal. So I know that those were some of the changes that Liz had worked on. If you look, there are a few additional changes in blue. Many of those are just typographical. But those would be changes that would be different from the last time that you saw these changes. But otherwise, they are in similar condition as they were before, with the exception of those 3 questions that were identified. At this time, this version, including the board's recommendations for more concrete answers, has been approved by legal all the way up to the top, as well as our deputy commissioner. I haven't heard back from the assistant commissioner, but we do have a deputy commissioner that approved these for publication, so long as the board is comfortable with it. And so if you have any recommendations after reviewing these that you'd like me to bring back to Liz and the team, I'm happy to do that, and we can try to keep working to improve the FAQs from a legal standpoint, while also trying to satisfy the need of the registrants and licensees that we have to find guidance as they move forward in the QBS process.
I missed the last meeting. Is the intent to publish these? They're not published now.
There's a version. Yes, the intent was that these would supplant the ones that are currently online. We originally, kind of the history of how we got here, there was a request to add a few points, and as a result of that, it ended up being escalated in legal. And legal took a look at it and decided that some of the wording might be too strong as far as taking too hard of a stance. And they also wanted to increase the disclaimer, just because QPS is not something we have the regulatory authority over. In the end, the court wouldn't give this board deference on their interpretation necessarily, depending on the situation that would arise in. So these were recommendations from our chief counsel as well as our deputy counsel as far as what they think would be a more legally sufficient way to answer these questions.
The intent is really, as far as giving guidance, we probably want to get these up there pretty quickly.
I think it's beneficial. We've learned through the state architect's office as well as the associations that these are heavily relied upon. And so that's the reason that the ones that are there now, we did not take those down despite hesitations from legal, because they are such a resource in the community. And so we don't want to eliminate that as an option. There's not really a lot out there at this point for people. So. John pointed out that question 20 on here is, and that's why it's highlighted in our copy, it's that the answer is actually dependent on an upcoming rule change. So if you do want to approve these, we may hold that one until at least that question until the rule is approved, but we can tentatively approve these and add that, I imagine.
We might use the word pending.
We could do that for a pending rule. I would hesitate to put guidance into the community on a rule that hasn't been approved through the AG's office for constitutionality and things like that.
When would that occur?
This rule, I believe, is part of the packet that is moving now. So it is in the justification memo. So kind of as what happens after you approve a rule. We produce the rule and make any changes the board sees fit, and then it is escalated all the way through the department. Each level of legal, all the way up to our general counsel, signs off on that rule. And then at that point, it is sent to the AG's office, and they review it to make sure that there's not any sort of constitutional issues. That rule is currently in the process of being reviewed internally before going to the AG's office. So if it were back from the AG's office and we had it maybe with the Secretary of State pending, I would say yes. But I think in this scenario, I would be uncomfortable posting something that we haven't had the AG sign off on for constitutionality.
You want to hold all of them until that one?
No, I think we can hold
okay, just the one. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
And that's a totally new question. It's not even part of the FAQs.
And it's based on,
It would be better to hold it probably.
Just that question, though. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, and if you wanted to approve it based on, I can bring it back if the rule changes through that process. Sometimes that does happen. People will make rule edits. We only bring the rule back if it changes its effectiveness. So if that happens, I can bring it back for reapproval on that.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding QBS? Yes, Steve.
Question 8. What is that question? What would a registrant want to include as far as a description of intended compensation?
We've seen it, and John, you may be able to speak on this more, I think we have seen it where people will list what they intend to pay subcontractors on particular sub-issues, and they think that they're fine because they're not presenting an overall cost, they're not talking about their services, they're talking about subcontracted services and things like that. I don't know if that's what that's going to.
This is method.
That's a different how you
determine. Whether you're going to charge a fixed fee or a percentage, you're not giving an amount. They're simply asking, are you going to charge a fixed fee or a percentage or some of your method of compensation, describing it, not an actual amount.
It seems confusing to me. What I have heard that some registrars want to include is hourly rates. And I think we've said no on that. So I'm just trying to figure out So we would have a registrant that would want to say that we will charge this municipality a percentage, but it's okay to say we want to charge you a percentage, but not state the percentage. Is that what the answer?
Yes, that is the answer.
I'll tell you we get these every once in a while where somebody will say we've got preliminary funding but don't have the whole project funded or something. How do you want to be how would you want to be compensated on the whole as a percentage of construction? Do you want it, do you need it? There's some municipalities that are asking kind of this, can we stagger the payment? Do you want it, do we have to pay you when it gets done, or do we pay you monthly? There's some that are kind of asking those questions, just to see, I reckon, from the budgeting standpoint. So if it's a percentage of construction and you don't get paid till it goes to contract, and it's, $100,000 construction, and there's some of that kind of stuff that they are asking on some of these, and I feel
the owner that wants to ask the question, not necessarily that the registrant wants to.
Yeah, and so sometimes some of them want to say base it on a percentage of the construction cost, and some want to do, hey, would you do it based on a rural development fee schedule or something? And but there's some of those kind of questions that I think are probably legitimate, because they're getting to the method of payment, not the cost.
This is beneficial.
We see it very infrequently, but we do see it enough that it's kind of helpful to be able to say, hey, we expect to be paid every month, because some of them want to be paid at every milestone, some want to be paid at complete. There's different things that we get. Again, it's kind of infrequent, but sometimes that is discussed in the proposal. How do you expect to be paid for certain parts of this or something? So that helps.
And pointed out that question stemmed from a staff that was from staff because it was asked by a registrant directly. So.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
I do have one more question. So, John, you've kind of reviewed these. Casey, do you have a question? Or are you going to follow your chair? I couldn't tell. I thought you were reaching. I couldn't tell if you were raising your hand or you were keeping yourself from falling down there. Sorry. Okay. So, the question, as stated, because you're getting the questions. We're not getting the questions necessarily, and you're the one that's on the front line of receiving. These are stated in a way that you think that you can give the registrants guidance correctly with what the intent of the rule. You're not sitting going, I don't know if I really want to say this or not. But you're fine with all that stuff.
I think so. I wasn't involved really in drafting the revisions, but I have reviewed them, and they don't really change any of the responses. It's just, it's worded in a more legally acceptable way, I guess you can say.
And again, you're the one delivering the message. But you're the one delivering the message generally. Mm-hmm. And to be able to come back and say this and go, well, that's something I'm not comfortable saying, so...
Oh, I'm comfortable providing.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's the case. Okay.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
That was my
question. I would be.
Casey, I think.
Yep. Casey?
I have one question on the new answer to number 21, the last sentence. The first two times I read it, it read to me the opposite of what it means, and I think it's because of the double negative, and I'm just wondering if we can rewrite that in a stronger way.
Yeah. I think anytime you put a double negative, it's just asking for trouble. So I agree. we should take a new swing at that last sentence if there's a double negative there. Yes, I agree, Casey. I don't think that's clear. So I think we can just say historical data. Pricing data is not prohibited so long as it doesn't enable the evaluation on the basis of competency. So we can flip it positively. Yes. Yes. I think we can do historical data is acceptable. And then I know that legal loves, if you notice they're out here, they like that so long as you can't evaluate on the basis of, only.
that's fine.
So we'll stick that little clause on the end, but then I think that's totally, my gut is that's appropriate. Obviously, I have to have that approved up higher, but I don't see that being a problem.
Casey, I just want to make y'all aware of what sometimes these are used for. When I send letters out to people, I, like, whatever the issue is in their RFQ, I'll highlight that piece, so we depend on this a lot. That's why I get a little sticky.
Okay. Any other comments?
So a question for Casey. So Casey, is going back to 8 and 9, I think it was, the fact that the answer is with a generally yes and a generally no, does that make it easier on you to be able to explain in layman's terms to these users, the purchasers, does that make it easier? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Sarah, do we need to wait and bring them back in August, or do we need to vote for all of them but the last 2 revisions?
I think if you would like, we can even vote. I think with 20, we want to hold on that until the rules penned. But I think I can read this in how I've changed this last sentence. Historical data is acceptable so long as it does not enable the evaluation on a basis other than competency or qualification. Does that sound all right? So I think if reading that into the record, if you would like to adopt these as is, we can go ahead and move forward, since as we've learned with the newsletter, publication can sometimes be a lengthy process. So.
Okay, do I hear a motion that we accept the changes to the QBS as stated by our legal counsel with the amendments to the number 21 and pending number 20?
Well, pending, or we just not going to write it in there at all?
I don't think it should. The one that is based on the pending rules, so until the AGs approve it, I do not think it should be listed on the website.
Okay. That's for me.
Here's what I would suggest. I'll make a motion that we approve these without number 20. But that number 20 has a placeholder still left on there, so that we're not having to go back and renumber. That just says number 20 period pending, so that you don't have to go renumber these again, right? I mean, that helps us a little bit. We can do something like that. And then with the correction stated on number 21 to remove the double negative language. I just don't want to renumber them and have to go find 18 and 17 and 14 and a half. And
so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Yes. Yes. The last unfinished business is a rules update, and I've kind of already, that's pretty much I've taken care of that. The rules that we passed last time that include that design competition language are in the tubes, in the process. They're moving forward. I anticipate Liz will have those to the AGs. I anticipate before August. We operate usually on a 9-month max rule processing schedule, and I think these are moving fairly consistently without too many hiccups so far through the internal process. And then I know Liz and John have been working on the new language for the continued education in August. So I think we're in good shape on rules.
Okay. This is a happy day. Okay. The next order of business is our officer elections. And at this time, our current slate is Frank Webster for chair, Robert Campbell for vice chair because of the engineering rotation within our officer slate, and Blair Parker for secretary. This time, are there any other nominations to be brought to the floor? There being no other nominations, we're going to vote on our officer slate. Do we do as a group or individually? Okay. All right. Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Slate carries. What?
You made the motion then. Does it need to be?
I did probably get
motion second.
Well, it comes from the nominating committee. So no, whoever the nominating committee was.
The
The nominating committee made the motion, so we really don't need a second, so we're just voting on it.
Okay. All right, let's make it official. Okay.
A quick question then, this is in theory Philip's last meeting, I suppose. Have names been, that we're working on whatever? Okay, so that's in process, just one days.
Okay. Last order of business is authorization of travel and speakers.
Well, we do have the September 13th event that Robert Campbell and Stephen King will be speaking at for the Tennessee Building Officials Association. I'll be speaking at the ASLA Tennessee conference. I think it's very brief, but might be a good idea to have a motion to authorize us for those activities, and I think that's all I'm aware of at present.
We have a motion to approve the travel expenses for those two events.
I'll make a motion.
Have a second? Second. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Are there any other announcements? I want to thank everyone for your support of my chairmanship position this year. It has been a great honor, and I'm more than willing to pass it to Frank when he gets back. But I'm always here, so if I can make it today, I can make it at any time. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Make sure, all right.
Thank you, Susan.